Hi, and welcome to Speechcast, the essential public speaking podcast. I'm Dave Azer, and my goal with this show is to get you to fall in love with and crush public speaking in all of its forms. And my guest this week is JP Hervis. JP is an award-winning broadcast journalist who spent 13 years investigating, reporting, and writing headlining stories for numerous stations in Florida, Mississippi, and West Virginia. JP has also covered local stories for CNN and Fox News and has worked in production for ESPN. Now, JP is the founder and operator of Brand Story Communications, a South Florida-based PR firm representing clients around the country in numerous industries. He has a ton of experience on and off camera as a storyteller and a brand builder. Before we chat with JP, just want to remind you to subscribe to this show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you do so on Apple iTunes, please leave a rating and a review if the spirit moves you. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's get into it. My conversation with my good friend JP Hervis on this episode of Speechcast.
This is Speechcast, the essential public speaking podcast. Here's national TV host, public speaking and media coach, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author Dave Azer.
JP, my man, my friend, my brother.
What's up?
How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm living it. I've got one shot in my arm and I'm waiting for the next one, and it's freedom.
All right. So in a few weeks, when we have you back for your next interview, we'll do it in person.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think, especially, and I know people from around the country are listening, but here in South Florida, it's especially, I knew at the beginning of the pandemic that it'd be tough because we're a bunch of really affectionate people. I'm like, I'm Hispanic traditionally, we're affectionate. I'm like, how do I not hug my friends? I couldn't even think of not seeing, but how do I not hug my friends? So that's, I want to hug Dave Azer.
It really is true though. I saw a couple of friends recently and it was like that. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
You're doing the elbow, the fist. It's weird.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about your lifelong commitment to broadcasting and public speaking and brand building. And you've built such a great career for yourself. You've got your own company now. It's really awesome to see all the great things you're doing. Let's hit the Wayback Machine. When did you fall in love with the idea of storytelling?
Sports broadcasting, ESPN, as a kid. When I was 16, 17 years old, and you're starting to do those college applications, you're looking around and trying to think, what is my major? And I always thought I'd be like a lawyer or something like that. So I knew there was an element of that. I had done theater when I was younger, musical theater. No, I can't sing anymore. Thank God.
I didn't know you ever could sing. This is a bit of a bombshell.
No, yeah, I don't think I'm going to rekindle the career here. No, but so when I was applying for college, I saw broadcast journalism, and it's just like, boom, the bells went off in my head. And I connected originally to sports, and I wanted to be a sports anchor. So I went to University of Florida and majored in broadcast journalism, and was a sports anchor there, and did a radio show there, and did the TV station at UF, which has an exceptional journalism program. And that's where it started.
Yeah, you and I have very similar backstories, because take your story, swap out University of Miami for University of Florida, and it's really essentially the same thing. I went to UM to be a sportscaster, did radio, did TV. Did you do play-by-play of any of the games?
I did high school. There was a local station that let me do play-by-play high school, 14:30 a.m. on the dial. So, and for any kids listening, the dial is this thing that you press on your radio to go find a number there the station is. But it's 14:30. I got to do sideline reporting. I mean, 5 people were listening and 4 of them were people I knew, but I loved every single second of it.
Yeah, and to go back to UF, same thing with UM for both of us, to be young, round about 20, give or take either side, and to be sportscasting, whether it's play-by-play or hosting the school cable show, and talking about some of the preeminent college athletes in the country. I am so grateful for the education I got at UM. I'm guessing same for you at UF.
Yeah, absolutely. To be on the sidelines of a University of Florida football game with 90,000 people around in the stands, and you're a lifelong sports fan and you're filming the game, and then you're going in to the press conference room and you're a part of that in the middle of it all. Those are big moments. I was grateful for every moment of it.
Did you learn some hard lessons? I know I made a ton of embarrassing mistakes doing play-by-play, just said some stupid things. But that's the point of college broadcasting, right? You learn on the fly.
Yeah, college broadcasting, early broadcasting, there's the mistakes that you make. And I have a story we can certainly get into early in my professional career outside of college. But I think one of the things that you start to learn college and in the early years in broadcasting is to be your own voice, right? And I know this is something that you talk about with your clients and on this podcast all the time, is to find your own voice. Because what I learned early was that I was trying to sound like guys that I heard doing play-by-play, or being color commentators, or being radio hosts, or being sports anchors. And so it was more me playing a role instead of me doing the role. And there's a big difference between the two. And I know we both talk to our clients about that.
And I learned that lesson the hard way. I'm curious if anyone told you that you needed to work on your technique, because in my case, I went to UM and I'm a freshman. I'm in a broadcasting class, and I'm in my dorm room watching like Monday Night Football on the TV with it on mute and just doing some play-by-play. And I give it to my broadcasting teacher, my professor, and I didn't think I was great, but I thought I was decent. And I'm telling you, she ripped me apart. And first of all, I'm so glad she took 10 minutes to listen to it, but I was not expecting the criticisms. First of all, I was way too nasally. I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, you're way too nasally. You need to lose that immediately. Second, stop talking so quickly. Third, stop acting like and sounding like someone you're not. I was devastated, crushed, but the best advice maybe I ever got.
Yeah, you got it earlier than I didn't get it till my first on-air job at WBOY Television in Clarksburg, West Virginia. For anybody who doesn't know the news business, you most of the time have to start in smaller markets and, build your way up. This was middle of West Virginia, wonderful place to live, great people, but a small market. And I came back to the station after shooting a story, and I had to present a script to either an anchor or an executive producer or news director for approval. And the anchor just redlined to the script of the writing. So it wasn't necessarily about my voice yet. It was that I was writing in a way that I think I was trying to write and tell a story like a news person should, as opposed to how I would tell the story to you of the people I just interviewed about this news that I've now gathered. So to see all those red lines in my script, that was the first time that I was like, okay, I need to be tighter. I need to be more concise. I need to be more energetic. I need to hit the hard points, the strong points, the memorable points, and not just kind of like float out there with random details.
I think it's a super valuable lesson for anyone listening or watching who wants to go into this field. You're always going to get criticized. You're always going to get feedback. I remember, I've actually really never told this story, but so I had for people who don't know, I was on Nickelodeon for many years. I had a pretty good career there. When my show ended, I moved to LA, and then a couple years later moved back to New York. So this is now 7 or 8 years after I had been on Nickelodeon. And I got a call to audition for a Nickelodeon show. And I thought, why do I even have to audition?
What, is it an acting show?
No, it was hosting. It was hosting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, what? I am a Nickelodeon host. Come on, but fine. I'll indulge them. Sure. No problem. So I go to Central Park, and it's a game show. I'm like, I hosted a Nickelodeon game show. Just give me the job. What are we wasting our time for? So I go and I audition, and we do our thing, and it's a game show. And I went back and I told my agent, I'm like, cake. This is how much money I want for it. Not only did I not get the gig, but I got a fairly harsh evaluation of my performance. Like, my energy was low, was the first thing I heard. And Nickelodeon.
Your energy was low.
Right.
Your energy was low.
Me.
Oh, man.
Nickelodeon game shows, it requires a ton of energy, right? So maybe I had been a few years removed from the Nickelodeon aspect of my hosting portfolio. So I heard that, and I guess it's just to sort of circle back. You're never going to stop. Everyone's a critic. Everybody has feedback, some of it useful, some of it not.
Sure. And you have to be ready for that criticism. And I'm actually curious to see in the future as people who have grown up with social media and more into selfies and having doing things on FaceTime and seeing themselves through digital mediums, if they're going to have more comfort, more security in doing that as they get into their professional careers, because, we didn't have that. We didn't have that at all. It was just either, remember when we had answering machines, we would hate the sound of our own voices, or your parents would. So I'm curious to see the next flow of executives that come into the world, their level of comfort or what their expectation is. So, because you and I both know, we would talk to somebody who has only communicated through some social media medium like this, is different than when you're on stage, or is different when you're interviewed by the news media, or it's different than when you're on a panel. So I think there's going to be a differentiation there that's going to be really interesting to people like you and me, or anybody listening that play the roles that we do to try to train professionals.
And one of the things I always tell people when they come to me for coaching is there is no excuse not to be practicing every single day. You have
Right.
all of these opportunities at your disposal. All you have to do is own a telephone, and you can press record, and now you're a content creator, and now you're a broadcaster. To go back to what you just said, you had to move to West Virginia just to be on TV. There was no other option for you at the time.
Right.
It's drastically different now.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. In one of the big transitions in my career is why I always wanted to be a sports reporter. Well, at the end of college, I was sending out my resume tapes, as in VHS tapes, to, job openings around the country that I thought I could get. Nobody was hiring me. So the first job I actually got out of college was working behind the scenes at ESPN. So I moved to Connecticut and I kept applying, and these were all sports jobs. And I remember the number. I applied to 56 sports reporter jobs over the course of 6 months or so, and I didn't even get a call. So I'm like, you know what? I just need to get on the air. And I always swore to myself I would not go into the news business. I didn't want to deal with the death and destruction and all that. And I love sports and I knew everything about sports. I'm like, I just need to get on the air. So I applied to 3 news jobs. I got a call back from all 3 stations for job interviews. And I said, you know what? God's telling me something. So that's when I started moving into news. I picked the station that I picked. And from there, I realized this was the way I wanted to go. This was a route for me. And I don't regret it at all.
Why do you think it is? Is it because there are, frankly, more newscaster positions than sports? Or is it because more people want to go into sports? Why do you think you had so much more luck?
Well, for me personally, it's not even the luck. It became apparent to me that I wanted to do news because sports, I loved it because it was an escape, or it is an escape. It's a passion. It's a wanting to be in the stands. And I actually felt it a little bit in college when I was sitting on the field at the University of Florida shooting a game, and I was looking up in the stands watching my fraternity brothers hanging out with some sorority girls. And I know that they were going to go have a party later on that night. And I was going to go into a locker room and talk to a bunch of football players, which was still cool. And then I was going to go back to the station and edit and broadcast that night and all that. And then I was looking at the grown-up, the professionals of local TV stations. I'm like, they're working weekends here. So it actually worked out that way. Sports was an escape. So when you make your escape your job, what do you have left to escape to? And you might lose passion for something that's an escape. And then this passion grew for news and what can be done and the stories you can tell and the people you can help and the value that it is in every single community. And and it's a love for journalism that now, 10 years since I was a TV news reporter, but 25 years now in the news business in one capacity or another, I still have an enormous passion for the news business.
And perfect segue. Let's talk about what you're doing now with Brand Story Communications. I got a bunch of branding questions to ask you for our listeners and viewers. But first, take a minute and tell us about your company.
Yeah, briefly, Brand Story Communications, people who leave the news business, one of the first places they jump to is the public relations world. So when I decided that I was going to try this PR thing, I got into it and I didn't know anything about PR except for I used to get a bunch of terrible press releases from PR people who obviously didn't understand the news business. So I felt the best way to represent companies or to represent people as a PR person in air quotes, was to just be the news reporter I always was. That every single person in every single business has a story, and I'm a storyteller. I don't need to assimilate to the way the PR world was. I felt like the PR world at some point would have to assimilate to the way that news reporters think. So at Brand Story Communications, we are primarily a media relations and crisis communications organization. And then we do video production that's just more storytelling. And there's a bunch of other PR things in the PR tree that other people can do, but this is what we focus on. And everybody on my staff are all people who have news experience, because storytelling, I think, is the key to making a connection between a company and a customer base.
So let's focus in on crisis communications for a second. For anyone listening, if let's say they own a business and they want to be the face of that business and, be on TV and give speeches and sit on panels. In the case of crisis communication, given that every situation is different, I understand that. Are there a couple of pieces of advice that you would give someone when they walk outside the front door of their office and all of a sudden there are 20 microphones in their face with hard-hitting, unfortunate questions that they don't want to answer, but they certainly don't want to say no comment? What would you tell someone like that?
Well, one of your first tips there is no comment, because no comment feels like you're hiding something. One thing we have to know in the background, because you made the great point that every situation is different, is, was there something that happened in your company that actually was wrong? Or was there an allegation or a misunderstanding or something that got out there that you didn't do wrong that you needed to clear up? So in the scenario that you draw up where you walk out and you didn't expect somebody and they're all there, it really is a very kind, confident, and calm push off of, I appreciate the fact that you guys have to do your job. Please let me know what your questions are and I will respond to you, but I can't do it in this circumstance right now. And then once you're out of that situation, move fast, because a news person only has to ask you the question. If you don't respond, the news person's already done their job. And we've all heard it when we watched the news story or read it. At the end of the story, the reporter goes, attempts to contact company X were successful, but they did not return our phone calls or answer our questions. That's ethically the only thing a journalist has to do. So you always respond, no matter what, because that way you're at least, good crisis communication is not about avoiding your head getting hit. It's about, at minimum, trying to put a helmet on when it happens. That's what it is. It's the mitigation of damage. It's not the elimination of damage.
I love that. That's such a great analogy. Yeah, I love it.
Especially nowadays, because there's a lot of citizen journalists and random people who can record you in a grocery store. And David, you and I had this conversation. It's talking to executives and realize even if you don't know it, you are the face of your company. So even how you conduct yourself in a grocery store, if you've got some a-hole person at the register in front of you in the line, you don't know who's recording. So if you're some C-suite executive and you go off, that can get out there in the social media world. So you are a business celebrity in a kind of way where you have to watch your steps in public nowadays, or else you create your own crisis.
Yeah, I think we're both journalists, so I'm not trying to bash our industry, but I think it's fair to say, by and large, journalists don't really care about your best interest. To your point, they're going to ask you for a comment. If you're going to say, I'll figure it out and get back to you later, get back to them quick, because they'll go ask someone else just so they have a spicy quote on the record. And now all of a sudden you turn on your TV and your story's being told for you and not the way that you want it to. Do you find, there's, I'm sure, been an uptick of this since COVID has started. It's presented a whole new swath of problems for people to deal with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, we've always been a go-to for crisis communications over the years, and positive media relations as well. But our crisis communications function in my company has doubled in terms of the amount of business we've seen over the last year and the amount of clients we've taken on, and the level of what they are as well. So it was to be expected. They can be clients in whether it's a healthcare or business. If you think about it, the mom and pop shop that's a restaurant, or the restaurant conglomerate, they both have issues with what happened in this pandemic, and a crisis can come from those. Disney could have major problems if it was ever sourced to be an outbreak place. And that's one of the reasons that it had to stay closed. How are they going to manage it properly? And that's one of the reasons why they wanted to function the right way. But the good thing is, and it's one lesson that people should take from the pandemic as we're hopefully wrapping it up, is if you as a business are on the right side of history, you're doing the right things. You are, in the case of the pandemic, cleaning and keeping the rules of social distancing and showing that you care about what happens to your customers and your staff. If you're on the right side and the responsible side of history, that's the best crisis communications possible. So if you come in and you get challenged from a news reporter and they say, hey, this person called us and said that you're doing X, Y, and Z wrong, you can say, here's the rules that we've had for our staff. Here's everything that we do. You're welcome to hang out. We are an open book. We are confident in what it is that we've done over time, and we'll put it up against any other business. So good crisis communications is pre-crisis planning, being on the right side, making the right decisions, making the responsible choices.
Last crisis communication question. Where are you on contrition? If in fact the company did do something wrong, but they're obviously working to fix that going forward, you think it's okay to stand up and say, look, we screwed this up, but here's how we're going to not screw it up going forward?
So let me take you behind the curtains of what that meeting looks like. There is me, my staff, there are the executives of a company, and then there's some lawyers. And so the short answer is, in my book, contrition is the way to go, because people appreciate honesty, and there's already, the bigger the company, the larger the mistrust by the public, just generally speaking. So contrition, the mea culpas, I'm a big proponent of. But you enter the lawyers into the equation, the bottom line is you do have to be careful with that. So that's why you can show contrition in an emotional feeling about maybe something that's occurred, but within a statement or standing out in front of cameras and saying something on behalf of a company, you have to be very cautious about it if you potentially find yourself in a legal situation as a company. So lawyers in crisis calm people sometimes butt heads, but they have a place in the room. They have a seat at the table, quite literally, and it has to be an element of a crisis communication strategy.
I just love the interplay and the dynamics of all these factions that are involved. Let's talk about brand building.
There's like a tribal picture in your head.
Oh, like yeah. No, it's like the past
Survivor.
Conch shell. Right.
right.
Right. Like the lion eating the gazelle. Okay. Brand building. I've got a listener who maybe wants to be the next, Marvel superhero movie reviewer extraordinaire, or I just made that up, whatever it is. How do you work with someone, or what would you tell someone as they're seeking out to build their brand? What are some things they can do so they become the preeminent authority on whatever jazzes them up the most?
Well, the first thing you do is you ask yourself, how are you different? Because there's rarely a space that there isn't already somebody in. So how are you different, or how can you be different? So, if there's 1,000 people who are the Marvel experts, to use your example, what is, maybe you're not going to review all 1,000, but what is the commonality between them, and how can you do it differently? Second, be confident in the fact that you are your own person. They have cloned goats, not people yet. So no matter who you are and what kind of expert you want to be, or what kind of public speaker you want to be, there's only one you, and there's only one life experience that you have. So whether, and you say it all the time, Dave, and you're so exceptional in doing it with your clients, when you get on that stage, no one's ever told your story or communicated your message in your way, because they just can't. There's not another you. If you can be an identical twin, and that's your twin has a different voice than you do. So, differentiation and confidence in the fact that your uniqueness is important and your story matters, and everybody has a story. You can live in a mountain with 10 cats and not talk to anybody, then come down from that mountain and become a public speaker, and you still have a story, even though you think your life has been boring on a mountain with 10 cats.
And you don't have to be the most polished person. You don't have to speak in perfect Shakespearean English. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because that's boring. You just got to be you, and you got to be passionate, right? That is what resonates.
That's the clear thing. So, one thing I tell my sons all the time, I have 2 4-year-olds and a 7-year-old. I tell them, do the things that you love the most. And I think that's true for adults too. So if you're going to be a public speaker about something that really means something to you, not something that you think you can make the most money from, but something that means something to you. Because ultimately, I think passion, people can read. And if people want to watch someone and connect to people that are passionate about things, you'll end up being successful in that anyways, because you believe in it. And also you probably have more insider knowledge of it. And I think that presents you, or puts you in the best position to be successful in a public speaking or media interview circumstance.
And it's funny, no matter the topic that you pick, there are going to be a ton of people who are interested in that topic. Like I am obsessed with tennis. I love tennis. And tennis is not that random, but it's not football, it's not baseball, it's not basketball. But when I go on like a tennis chat or I listen to a tennis podcast, I'm like, huh, wow, way more people love tennis than I even thought. So the point is, whatever it is, living on a mountain with 10 cats, there's probably a bunch of people who are super interested in that.
Hey, you say there's a magazine for everything. There's an underwater basket weaving magazine. Sometimes I'll have clients that are of a very specific industry that don't need to be on ABC News or the local paper or the Today Show. So I don't reach out to them. There's no real value for them. They want to just be in their industry trades. And then you open up and you research and you find out which industry trade media outlets are there that's good publicity for them. And there's 6 different outlets. There's 6, online magazines. There's 20 podcasts. There's a YouTube channel on it. And you know what? There's value there because the end audience is actually watching that. The end user, the potential customer for that client is going to be there. So you go for it.
That's super interesting. I have a question based off of that just came to me. When you have clients who want to be on TV, because TV is the most glamorous end all be all, but they're a better fit on another platform, is that a hard sell for you to sell them on? Is it getting easier? Are people starting to understand that they don't need to be on television? They can be elsewhere and still be powerful and effective?
It's a demographic answer. It really is an age group thing. You can tell a 30-year-old C-suite executive that, and they'll understand the power of a podcast. They understand the power of being interviewed by somebody who has a YouTube channel that has 500,000 followers or 50,000 followers or 1,000 followers, but in the area that you sell your widget locally. But if someone's a little bit older and has been in business for 30, 35 years and they're a high level executive, you have to come in there almost like it's a sale and show them the numbers. Honestly, Dave, I think the answer for anybody, no matter the industry, no matter the size, is you're probably going to have an industry trade, whether it's TV, radio, podcasts, newspapers, online, social media, that there's going to have value. But the general audience media still has value because it carries weight. It carries weight to still say that you were covered on, and we're talking on a publicity marketing standpoint, you were covered on ABC. You were interviewed by CNN. Those things will, I think, always carry value because robots will never replace humans in the news business. That's still going to be a human thing.
Are we sure about that?
Well, I think it'd be pretty boring, personally, to watch the robot tell the news. So I think that you could still have you're trying to earn differentiation point, the exposure, but a differentiation point between your company and your competitor, and showing them that you've been covered by these legitimate media outlets, and also somebody watching the story about your company or watching you share your expertise. I think that increases your exposure and your trust factor with people who may buy your widget or select your service.
Okay, last one. Give me a favorite memory, either from your time being on television or what you're doing now, and maybe a really cool placement that you secured for one of your clients. You can give me a couple if that's easier, but tell me something great about an experience you've had.
So I've had 2 stages of my career. I'm a storyteller for 20 some odd years now, but there's the reporting stage and there's this job now in media relations. So the quick one is, as a reporter, my second news job was at WLBT television in Jackson, Mississippi. And I was able to do an investigative story about a guy who sold burial insurance. Never heard of it before until I moved to Mississippi. And when this poor family had lost their loved one and it was time for them to utilize the insurance to help with services, the guy disappeared with their money. Well, I found the guy. We drove around Mississippi, we followed some leads, and we found him. And he was washing his car. So we came out of the car hot, my photographer and I came out just rolling. And as I walked up to him, he ran into the car and he just closed the door and then he just hid like this. And I just sat there and I was there to just get his side of the story. And I had proof and I had all of these things. So to make a long story short, the guy lost his license. And we presented the story to, I believe it was the Secretary of State of Mississippi, and it ended up being that state had the lowest percentage of protection for fraudulent instances like this. And they changed the law. They changed the law in the state to better protect people, just from me running up on a guy who was washing his car and I found him.
Right on,
That felt really good.
Right
and then,
on.
And then the other one is, and we, we want to laugh, and this is such a positive podcast, but you know where I'm going to go with this, Dave.
I do.
And nothing's meant more to me than the work that I've been able to do with some parents who lost their children in Parkland. Manuel and Patricia Oliver and Linda Beagle, they both lost their sons. And so to earn any exposure when I get the opportunity, so that they have the platform to talk about protecting other kids and making smart choices in some of the laws that they believe should be changed, that means something to them. I see the life inside of them when they have a chance to share that. And in terms of exposures, the year anniversary after the year mark after the Parkland shooting, I was in New York with Manuel and Patricia Oliver, whose son Joaquin was killed. And they had a huge press conference. We got tons of media there, but then also we bounced around. We went from ABC to NBC to CNN to PBS and that, in terms as a publicist, you had the emotional, great feelings that, hey, you were helping them and this was giving them life a year to the day of the worst day of their life. But also as a publicist, it was just cool to be bouncing around Rockefeller Plaza and CBS, and you saw CBS, or you go from seeing this anchor to that anchor and being in this news setting and watching the news people that you trust, that are the highest levels of the business, Christian Amanpour, get emotional about this. And you're making an impact, and millions of people around the world had watched what you had done. And so that's, I don't know what's ever going to beat that. And
you're way too humble and modest to brag about yourself. And this is not about you, the work with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and Parkland, but I am going to brag about you for a second. I'm so proud of JP Hervis for what he has done. I actually went to Stoneman Douglas High School. I was part of the first graduating class, so it has a special place in my heart. I live in South Florida. JP has been phenomenal with what he has done to help those families tell their story, and he does it selflessly, and he does it tirelessly, and he works his ass off doing it. And dude, I love you for it. I'm so proud of you for it. And this is the perfect time. If anybody is listening and they want to hire somebody to help them tell their story, and you don't even have to live in South Florida, JP is the guy. I stake my reputation on it. He's the best. He cares about you. He works super hard, and he's got a great heart. So now that I gave you all that, I built you up, my friend. Just tell people how they can find you.
Well, our website is brandstorycommunications.com, and people can contact me through there. My email is jp@brandstorycommunications.com. Reach out to us either way. And look, no matter what, I like to talk to people. I like to meet people, whether we can help you or not, or we can at least guide you in the right direction. We have conversations like that sometimes. I feel blessed about how fortunate my company, myself, my family has been in transitioning of careers, and where we are 10 years later after I started this agency, and 20 some odd years of being in the storytelling business.
Well, keep crushing it, my friend. See you in person in a few weeks. Can't wait to hang out and catch up.
Looking forward to it, man. Thanks, Dave.
You got it, buddy. Thanks, JP, so much for joining us and being an awesome guest on Speechcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't done so. And if you do listen to us on Apple iTunes, it would be awesome if you could leave a rating and a review. I would truly appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And I'll be back next week with another brand new episode of Speechcast.